Hey guys, Paul Altieri here. We're on a special day because we have a special watch here that we're happy to talk about. We've got our good friend here, Ripley Sellers, that's going to comment on all three watches we have here. And I can't wait to get started. Ripley, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to do a video with you. Yeah, always good to see you.
It's been a long time, but again, this is a special watch.
Very special. And then you also pulled some special things out that we can compare it to. These are a couple of the vintage ones here, your personal collection.
Yeah, we're going to talk about them all one at a time. So we've got a 6239 here, vintage model. We're going to get some good close-up shots in a bit.
The first Daytona.
Yes, the first Paul Newman Daytona. We've got a 6263, many of which consider it to be one of the grail of all grails.
And the final generation, or the final series of the first generation of Daytona.
Right.
So you kind of start point, end point, and then all the way up to the modern era.
Right, well, that's why we're here today, is the Le Mans, the watch everybody wants but no one can get. We're going to talk a little bit about it. It's the 126529 LN. Did I get that right?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
And this is such an interesting piece. So let's, before we even get into the watch, I think it's worth discussing how it was released. Rolex almost always only releases all their watches at Watches and Wonders.
Always.
And this is one of the rare exceptions, and only an accountable number of times, like the James Cameron, which was to commemorate an event, or this, also to commemorate an event, in this case, the 100th anniversary of the 24-hour Le Mans race. But this came out in June 2023. I was camping that weekend, totally unexpected. I see the press release come in. I'm not anywhere near a computer. There's no way I can write it up. But that's how unexpected it was. No one knew it was coming. I mean, people had to hint because of the anniversary. But
surprise for all of us.
And then I think the watch that they delivered is so unexpected as well.
Yeah.
At a quick glance, it almost doesn't look that different than a standard Daytona, but then once you start digging into the details, everything about it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Well, for starters, it's white gold, not steel.
Yeah.
And then unlike the black ones, you get a proper reverse Panda dial. You get 100 in red on the bezel, but more importantly, you get what is, people are calling the modern equivalent of the Paul Newman dial. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that? Because if you look at them side by side, it's not like one is an exact recreation, but the inspiration is obviously there when you look at the subdials. Is this a modern Paul Newman?
Well, they're calling it the modern Paul Newman. To me, it's not the three-color dial like the Paul Newman. However, what I do like about what they did here, among other things, is that they reversed the dials. You know, in the 116500 that came out in 2015? 16? It's all black or it's all white. So the dials, the subdials, don't quite pop. What I like about this is they pop. What do you think about that?
I've always liked the full solid contrasting subdial look. I almost don't want to call the modern steel Daytona a Panda because I think a Panda is full spots, not rings. Rings are like a leopard or something like that. But I always like the contrasting subdials. Not only does it kind of harken back to the vintage side of things, but I also think it's just more legible when you have that one solid register with the markings on it.
Yeah.
And it also showcases the numerals a bit better. There's no contrasting ring, and on this one, it really is all about those little bricks on the lollipops in there.
Well, the other thing too about this is it's the little things that they did, and obviously they spent most likely years designing and styling and the technical things about it that I think are overwhelming when you really think about it. But it's the red 100. At first, I got to tell you, I didn't like it because it kind of spoiled that look a little bit. But I am warming up to it. How do you feel about the red?
I kind of like it. You know, just like yourself, I don't think I like it better from an aesthetic standpoint, but I think I like it within the context of the watch.
Yeah.
Because they didn't do really a tricolor dial on this. It's largely black and white. Yes, you have the red Daytona name, but you look at this one, a vintage tricolor Paul Newman, and you get red, not just for the Daytona name, but around on the minute track there. So I kind of like that they did that sort of historical tie-in.
Yeah.
Yes, it symbolizes 100 years of 24 hours of Daytona, but it also sort of lets you know that white, black, and red was the thematic colorway that's always existed there. I think for me, though, probably the most interesting thing about this watch, aside from the fact it was made for less than a year, because it was discontinued this year at Watches and Wonders and replaced by the gold one.
Not even quite a year, actually a little
less than a year.
Less than a year.
June to April.
Caught me off guard on that too.
Yeah, and then the new one, this one Rolex publicized when they released it last year in June. The new one is like an off catalog. We were discussing it the morning of the show. You're like, is this a real thing? I'm like, it's out, but they've moved the Le Mans over to the off catalog side, so you won't find it on Rolex's website.
Yeah, that was another surprise. And Rolex is, if nothing else, a rule follower. And for them to do something like this, it was just so unprecedented. What about the 24-hour subdial?
That to me might be the most interesting physical aspect of the watch. Rather than being a 12-hour chronograph, it is a 24-hour chronograph.
It is. Yes, it is.
Which makes sense. You have to track 24 hours of Le Mans. But you know, it's therefore a different movement than what's in the standard Daytonas. Instead of the 4131, you have the 4132. It's largely the same, but the fact that it isn't just an aesthetic rendition, but it's actually functionally different than a standard production Daytona, I think it makes it really special when you look at the context of all of the Daytonas Rolex has ever made from the 60s all the way up through today.
Good point. So how much do you think Rolex was influenced by these older models, the vintage? Do you feel like they've made an attempt to pay homage to these earlier models?
Yes, I think that the desire to pay homage to them is 100% undeniable, but I think it's Rolex, right? So they're not like Tudor. They're not going to make like a proper vintage-inspired piece. They're always going to be making a modern watch, pushing the envelope forward. And so it still very much is a modern Daytona. You even get the modern lugs that you don't find on like the 116-500. It's all solid links, display case back. You know, this is a thoroughly sapphire crystal automatic winding. Both of these were manual, but aesthetically, you can't not say that there's visual similarities between them. And I think you can say the same with modern Rolex watches outside of the Daytona. Look at the Explorer 2. They brought back the orange hand. It's not a Steve McQueen, but it's very obvious where they're looking to. And I think the same thing about this.
So compare this to the 116-500. Obviously, you got a different bezel, slightly different bezel.
Different
the
case,
lugs are a little bit
lugs,
more contoured.
Different movement.
Talk about that a little bit, because I'm getting or guessing that you like this model a little bit better.
Than the 116-500? Yeah, I do. Although I will say that I prefer the old generation's lugs. They were a little bit less blocky, a little bit more sculpted, a little bit prettier. But as far as a watch, I think this is, of the current production Daytonas, well, I guess it's not current production anymore, but of the modern Daytonas, this might be the one to have. So it was the first Le Mans, it's discontinued.
So you've had both of them in your hands. The white gold
Not at
version.
the same time, but
not at the same, and the yellow gold. Which one pops more? If you're gonna buy one, which one are you gonna buy?
I think the white gold, if I'm being, I love the yellow gold. It reminds me of the John Player Special, really, really pretty watch, but I think, I think the white gold, it just pops more. You look at it and you're like, oh, he's got a 116-500. No, what is that? Hold on, the registers, oh, what's that on the bezel?
Yeah.
It's a little, plus it's the original. Like, I feel like the yellow one, it's a follow-up. This was the one released on the day to celebrate the 100th anniversary.
I totally get it.
It's gotta be it for me.
However, you're at a cocktail party. One guy's got a yellow gold version. The other guy's got the white gold version, this one right here. Tell me, come on, tell me, be honest. The yellow gold is gonna pop. It's gonna be, you're gonna see that from 30 feet away. What is it? You're gonna wanna walk over to the guy and say, what do you have on? And you're right, it looks just like the John Player, which is now $1.5 million, 2 million, right? So we're in good company here. So now compare it to the 6263 or the 6239. Obviously this looks a lot smaller. It is smaller. But what about the 6263? How do you think these all compare? We compared it to the 116-500. What about these two models?
I mean, so different. Everything, you know, this was the original vision for the Daytona. So they had a steel bezel, pump style pushers, acrylic crystal, manually wound, not even an in-house movement, a manually wound Valjoux base caliber in there. And then you can literally see how things were developing. So by the end of that first generation, you've got a bolder bezel with a black insert, you know, higher contrast. You have an improved version of the same manually wound movement, but now you have screw down pushers, better water resistance. You could almost see this was getting ready for the next series, which became the Zenith Daytona, and then eventually onto the in-house ones. But this, you look from the 6263 to a modern Daytona, and you see, oh, well, they've retained the screw down pushers, but they've added crown guards, and the case has gotten bigger. And then the bezel, you see a lot of the same designs. When Rolex brought back the ceramic bezel, we were talking about it. We're like, oh, look, they're doing that thing with the 6263. They're bringing it back, the black bezel again.
Yep.
And you can see they're still doing that. And this is you can almost go back and forth. When Rolex first started out, it was a metal bezel, and then by the end of the series, they were doing black bezels. And then, well, they also had the 6265, which had a metal bezel. And then you look at modern Daytonas, the steel Daytona previously had a steel bezel, and now they moved it over to a black ceramic bezel. So I think there's sort of these parallel mirrors as you go look back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and then still again today in the 2020s. Yeah. You know, this is a perfect example of Rolex may look back and pull a little element, but they're never actually revisiting the past.
Like other brands do.
Yeah, some brands make a one-to-one, almost exact recreation, or maybe they'll update the materials, but you know, in hand, there's no question over which one's old and which one's new, and yet there's so many little aesthetic details between them that connect what's, you know, so decades of
before
history.
This watch came out, before it was launched, the watch to own was the 116-500. Stainless steel, black, white dial. Everybody wanted it. As soon as they came in, they sold, but they were around. There was supply. There still is supply. If you walk in a Rolex store today and you try to buy one, there's still a waiting list. 2 years, 5 years, depending on who you are or where you are. How many do you think they made? Because they made them for less than a year. Each AD did not get, not every AD got one.
Yeah, not every AD got one, so.
Estimate, just ballpark it for everybody. How many do you think they made worldwide? I have a number, but I want to hear yours.
I cannot imagine it being more than a couple thousand tops, and I think that would be on the really high end.
Really?
Well,
I think it's much less. I think it's under 500.
I would probably bet closer to that. I know they make about...
Which makes it even crazier, because to try to get your hands on one, it's difficult. It still is.
I can't see them making more than, you know, because they had to do a different movement. This wasn't as simple as like, hey, let's just make a different dial, put it in the white gold case and call it a day. They had to make a different ceramic bezel. They had to make a different dial. They had to alter the recent movement they had just come out with, you know, a few months prior. This is an appreciably different watch. It wasn't just make one part. There was some engineering that had to go on to make, even just to make the hour totalizer move at half the speed. So, you know, on one hand, they were going to make enough to make sure it was viable, but at the same time, I don't know anyone who was able to get these who wasn't like an A-list celebrity or like
Tom Brady, Mark Wahlberg, right?
Exactly.
You've got to be an A-lister to get that, or I think I was quoted in one article, you had to have won the Oscar or an Oscar to get one. Is this ever going to be on your list someday? Is this a must-have for your collection?
Well, I would love it if you gifted me for Christmas, but I don't think I could ever afford this.
You'd have to get in line for that.
Or a time machine, you know. So a time machine, maybe I could go back and get my name in the door. But I think at this point, because it's now discontinued, and who knows where this collection or the Le Mans concept may go from here. But if you look at the context of the first iteration of everything is always going to be the one. Look at the first Submariner. It may not be the most expensive Submariner, but it's certainly one of the rarest.
Yeah.
And same thing as Daytonas. Everyone loves the 6263, but the 6239, like, come on, that's the OG one. So I feel like even if this becomes a whole wild collection, this singular piece released for the 100-year anniversary that was produced for less than a year, I don't foresee this ever becoming attainable to me unless I win the lottery or the Oscar. So I mean, I'd love to own it, but I have to appreciate it from afar.
The yellow gold version. You had it in your hand. I think it's an amazing watch. I've always wanted to have a John Player special in my collection. I don't. Hopefully someday I will. But that is an alternative to buying the John Player.
An actual John Player,
a John Player.
If you can get one.
If you can get one.
If you can get one, yeah.
So, but that could in some way pull a little bit of demand for this. What do you think of that? The white gold version versus the yellow?
It could, and then there's always going to be the thing where, let's say they make the yellow one for 2 years. And you're wearing this and I'm wearing the yellow one.
Wait, don't say that. You think they're going to discontinue that?
The yellow one?
Yes.
Nothing lasts forever. But I think the yellow one will have a noticeably longer production period than this because it's an off-catalog model.
Yeah.
And they never...
Well, they're both off-catalog, right?
Well, they announced this one, so it was on Rolex's website. The white gold one technically wasn't an off-catalog model because if you went, well, up until this past Watches and Wonders, you could configure it. And the yellow one
But the yellow gold is still not on the catalog.
No, it's not. And I think that was the difference. Every so often, Rolex likes to publicize one of their off-catalog models. Rainbow Daytona, the Everose version, that gem set crazy Yachtmaster. And so this was almost that, where you couldn't really buy it, but we made it something you could see. The yellow one, it was just, they kind of released into the air without a press release whatsoever.
Yeah.
There was no images of it on Rolex's website even. So, I don't know, maybe there will be some demand drawn away from this, but at the same time, it's always going to be the first. If you have this and you see someone with a yellow gold one, I don't think they'll make the yellow gold one for less time. And because it's the second one, it might be the fan favorite, but there's always going to be, this will be the rarer of the two.
Well, there's a lot of guys out there that just won't wear yellow gold. It's just a little bit too much. That's what's so nice about the white gold. It's a little bit more understated. So you might be right.
And I mean, it's all about the little details. Not necessarily the stealth wealth vibe, but if someone just wanted a black and silver Daytona, they could go get a 116-500 for a fraction of the price. This is for the guy who is a Daytona fan, serious Daytona fan, and wants these little details. This isn't a watch that is best appreciated from across the room. It's a watch that's appreciated up close. And so maybe the person who's going for these doesn't want that yellow gold watch, which almost just speaks for itself from afar. This is the one that warrants a closer examination, where you get to see it and see the font and see the red text, see the display case back, and then realize it's got a 24-hour totalizer, which is absolutely awesome.
All right, so maybe I'll keep it. You talked me into it.
So I guess you'll have to get me something else for Christmas.
Look how
then.
that pops, though. Is that incredible?
Yeah, I mean, it looks different than a modern Daytona, and I think that
You know what it is?
an interesting aspect.
It's the white dials. They just pop. Makes the whole dial, everything pop. Incredible. They did a great job. They really did.
And I mean, this is sort of proof. People like to say Rolex as a company can be boring with their releases, or they don't ever surprise us, but I think that statement has been so wrong in the last several years, from the puzzle paste day-date to the palm dial that I'm wearing, to the colorful OPs, the celebration dial, the gold deep sea. This, Rolex is surprising us more in recent years than I can ever remember. Yeah. And this was probably one of the biggest surprises. Yeah. Maybe this or the gold deep sea.
Well, they're genius at marketing. They really are. They make tremendous watches, the craftsmanship, the styling. But they're marketing geniuses as well.
Now, one question for you. This is the Le Mans watch, and as we all know, if you win the Rolex 24-hour Le Mans, you get a Daytona. Do you think anyone who wins is a little bit sorry they're not getting one of these and they're just getting the standard model?
Yeah, probably. And plus, where would they put? Usually they engrave the back, right? Where are they going to engrave this?
No, maybe that's their excuse, so we can't give you the...
Sorry, guys. Well, we brought you in here because we want to gift this to you. So this is yours to keep.
Christmas came early, thank you.
It's a little early in August, but we want you to keep it for helping us and being with us.
I will wear it in good health, and I didn't even have to win the Rolex 24 hours. Before we end here, I've said that I prefer the white gold. I think it's just more significant, even though the yellow is flashier. But what one would you choose between the two Le Mans Daytonas?
Well, I think I want them both. But if I had to pick one, I think I'd go with the yellow gold. I think it's going to be a little bit flashier. But having said that, every time I buy a yellow gold watch, I've got a 6263 in a black dial and a champagne dial. I never wear them. I wear them for like a week and then I put them down because I'm not a flashy guy. But I still want one. I would go with the yellow gold.
And then I guess that makes it okay for me to have this one then.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Ripley, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. And thank you for pulling out this vintage heat from the safe. These are things you rarely get to see.
Love talking watches, really, all day long.
I'm happy to join anytime.